In the late 1970s, Dungeons & Dragons was largely an adversarial wargame. Dungeon masters built literal funhouses filled with teleportation traps and magical spheres of annihilation designed to instantly punish players who touched the wrong door. A new module called the Hidden Shrine of Tamoachan inverted that dynamic before the game even started. The inciting incident strips the players of their choices entirely, plunging them through a collapsed floor and trapping them in the darkest, lowest tier of a forgotten Mesoamerican pyramid. Instead of volunteering to descend into the earth for loot, the players are forced into a state of survival horror. Their only objective is to fight and negotiate their way upward through the ascending tiers of the ruins to reach daylight. Flipping the architecture in this way meant players could no longer meticulously poke at every tile looking for treasure. Every step was about finding an exit, turning the environment itself into the primary antagonist. This structural subversion was born out of sheer corporate panic. In the summer of 1979, Tactical Studies Rules, or TSR, the corporate publisher of D&D, desperately needed a new competitive tournament module for an upcoming convention, but their veteran designers were entirely booked. To prove his creative value, a newly hired copy editor named Harold Johnson volunteered to write the adventure himself, alongside co-author Jeff Leeson. The two had only weeks to conceptualize the entire dungeon. To meet the printer's uncompromising deadline, Johnson synthesized their chaotic notes by subjecting himself to a grueling 48-hour continuous typing marathon. The severe limitations of that sleepless weekend forced Johnson to solve immediate logistical problems at the table, resulting in design techniques that the role-playing industry still relies on today. Johnson replaced the arbitrary magical curses of older dungeons with naturalistic hazards. The shrine defends itself with collapsing sandboxes, rolling boulders, and caustic line counters, physical mechanisms engineered by a paranoid ancient civilization. The authors heavily researched real-world Mayan and Aztec mythology, creating the fictional Olmec Empire. Rather than a scheming dragon, players face the terrifying remnants of a collapsed society, including deities like Camazotz, a bat god waiting in the dark. To enforce the strict 2-hour time limit required for the convention tournament, the authors flooded the entire lower tier of the ruins with a noxious subterranean vapor. This is a chart showing the traditional flow of early tabletop exploration. Players engage in combat, barricade a door, and rest to heal their wounds. But in Tamoachan, the gas acts as an inescapable clock. For every in-game hour spent in the lower levels, the gas inflicts 1d6 points of poison damage. Because resting takes an hour, this mechanic mathematically negates stopping to recover, turning the dungeon into a war of attrition, forcing players upward. The ruins of Tamoachan demonstrated that an indifferent, decaying ecosystem, governed by the strict laws of cause and effect, could terrorize players far more effectively than a traditional, scheming villain. But this highly specific physical environment created a new logistical problem. At a competitive tournament, how could multiple judges accurately and fairly describe complex Mesoamerican architecture to different tables of players? Johnson solved this by inventing standardized boxed text. He formatted atmospheric descriptions inside borders, instructing the dungeon master to read them aloud verbatim so that every group of players encountered the exact same environmental details. He also recognized that words alone couldn't capture the bizarre cultural dioramas. The module included a separate 8-page visual aid booklet, instructing DMs to hand specific ink drawings directly to the players, turning the game into a shared multimedia experience. To further clean up the reading experience, Johnson pulled the mathematically dense monster statistics out of the individual room descriptions and consolidated into reference matrices at the back of the book. By separating the cold mechanics from the flavor text, TSR taught dungeon masters to prioritize narrative immersion and environmental observation over raw tactical wargame data. The rush to finalize these innovations took a toll. During the final hours of his typing marathon, an exhausted Johnson made a typographical error, accidentally dropping the first N from the historically accurate intended name, Tamoachan. There was no time to fix it. At roughly 2 in the morning on the day the team was scheduled to depart for the convention, a staff member drove the finalized manuscript to the printer, grabbing the fresh pages just as the company vehicles were pulling out. The staff manually collated the 300 collector's edition copies and stuffed them into plastic zipper bags in the back of the van while hurtling down the highway toward Pennsylvania. The subsequent 1980 mass-market release introduced the Olmen culture to the world of Greyhawk. By integrating Mayan and Aztec mythology into the game, the module demonstrated that the rules could simulate diverse global histories alongside traditional fantasy. The formatting choices made during that 48-hour crunch, standardized box text, the visual aid booklet, and separating math from narrative, became common practice across the industry. Tamoachan moved the hobby toward a more professionalized style of publishing, establishing that a dungeon could be a cohesive historical site governed by its own internal logic.